Very good. Okay, I think I just stopped screen. We're now recording. We have 8 people, maybe more will join. So welcome to our monthly meeting of our 50 by 30 activist team. Our goal is 50% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030 in order to preserve the world for our children and beyond. My name is Steve Miller from Middletown, as you can see. Our meeting will have 2 parts. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes just talking about quick status report on the recent work of our team. And I'm going to elaborate a bit for people on the call who aren't familiar with what we've done. And then we will follow that by our featured speaker, Michael Winka. And I'm going to introduce him in a few minutes. So 3 weeks ago, we sent a letter of a series of recommendations to Governor Murphy. The letter took about 2 months, maybe even 3 months to finally come to reality. I'm reaching over here. I'm going to try to put it on the screen. Here we go. Not doing too well. Oh, there. So and I'll share screen again. So this letter went out September 30th or October 1st, and it had 3 recommendations to set greenhouse gas reduction goals for 2030 and beyond. And we were really, first part of this was supporting the Empower NJ environmental organization, which represented about 120 or so environmental organizations in New Jersey. So there were a group of 8 of us who wrote this letter, and we represented about 12 different environmental organizations. We seconded what the Empower petition had written in a letter to the New Jersey DEP. And we had reviewed our letter multiple times, reviewed it with Hannah Thonette, who's the governor's Environment and Energy Policy Advisor. Mike, you might know her.
Yep, I work with her.
And also got feedback from Randy Solomon, who's the Executive Director of Sustainable Jersey. He's the Chief Executive of that organization that supports green teams that are appointed by the ruling bodies in maybe 400 New Jersey municipalities. Michael, you may know Randy as well.
Yep, I worked with Randy for a long time when he was well back in Rutgers and Highland Park. So, cool guy.
Wow, it's amazing how people know each other. So our first recommendation was to set New Jersey goal of 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. That doesn't occur anywhere in documentation. I figure it's because I don't see a way for New Jersey to get there. And but yet that's what the Paris Agreement says we need to do, and thousands of climate scientists, and what Joe Biden wants to declare with the Paris Agreement. So we were saying with recommendation 2 that we recommended Governor Murphy get the New Jersey municipalities motivated, because in New Jersey, that's where the emissions arise. So recommendation 2, we're going down on our letter. Where are you? It's this one. Recommendation 2 is to mandate that each municipality create a 10-year energy and emission reduction plan as recommended by the New Jersey Energy Master Plan. And but it's buried like 100-page 195 or something in that document. And this would not be an unfunded mandate. The state would have support systems, expertise, documentation, and hand-holding using existing resources such as Sustainable Jersey, and that's why I got Randy Solomon involved. Now, Sustainable Jersey has a Gold Star in Energy program. It's designed sort of like a one-shot deal, though, for the various actions. And the but they could be repeated year after year. And they can be used by each of those 400 or 500 New Jersey towns to track and lower greenhouse gases. Basically, you need to move from fossil fuels to renewable electricity, and that's why we have recommendation 3, which is to take rapid steps to achieve 100% clean electricity by 2035. So the status to date is we got an immediate acknowledgement by the governor's office. They got it, thank you. And also a thank you from the governor's energy policy advisor. And we're hoping for a better response after the November 2nd election. And we're going to continue to lobby to set in motion, regardless of whether the governor does something, because we're pretty eager to move forward with emission reductions. So any questions by you people who are new to us?
Steve, this is Marty from Mount Laurel. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, Marty.
Good, good.
I'm going to stop share.
This is terrific. And one of the questions I have, I just found out that our local township has passed an ordinance to purchase 10 trucks for approximately $750,000. And I'm wondering if there's any research being done about energy, clean energy trucks that the townships can use, because, I imagine these trucks are going to be in operation 6 to 10 years. And so here we are, almost 2022. And so 8 years to 2030, that's not really 10 years anymore. And yeah, I don't know if there are any resources available that I would like to bring to the attention of our town council, so that
yeah, well, there probably are grants. I know New Jersey's very actively going out giving grants to towns.
So
Michael.
So DEP has a RGGI funding with EDA to support heavy duty vehicle electrification. So you may want to reach out to the green DEP's website and EDA's website. So I don't know what the dollar amount is or what the rebate process is, but I know they have programs to sort of
okay,
help
an EDA,
move.
I'm not familiar with that.
Economic Development Authority.
Oh, okay, sure.
Jonathan
Okay.
Ratner is the person you want to talk to, and
okay.
at DEP, it's Peg Hanna. So, and again, just search their website. I don't know what the money is, but I know they have a program trying to advance buses and garbage trucks and heavy duty vehicle electrification. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just saw something about the NJ Transit going out to purchase their first 8 electric buses.
Yeah,
yes,
that's been a long haul for trying to get that done. So we started back in the last Christie administration to try and get that done.
Great.
What I'd recommend is that everybody in their hometown monitor what their towns are doing. And the moment they start to bid or look like they're going to bid for vehicles, make sure they know that you want to have them be green. I do that in Middletown all the time. They know me very well. And know other people in my team as well. So I appreciate that question, Marty, and I'm glad we had the answer. So with that, let's move on to our featured speaker, Michael Winka. He really has an impressive long bio. I can email you upon request, but let me summarize. He was the clean energy advisor to the New Jersey BPU president the last 8 years, and he knows really well the New Jersey energy plan. He said he managed the original New Jersey greenhouse gas reduction plan back in 1997, and recently was on the teams that generated the New Jersey Energy Master Plan, which was published January last year, and the previous underpinning document, the 2019 Integrated Energy Plan. So I remember many months ago, Mike suggested that he could at some point share his insight on how New Jersey could easily reduce greenhouse gases. And now we have it. Reasons to be optimistic that we will reach 100% clean energy goals. So Michael, take it away.
Yeah. And so in terms of your letter, I think getting to 50% by 30, so 50 by by 30 is probably doable. It's a little stretch, but doable, at least in New Jersey and a couple of other states, a couple of handfuls of states. You know, to do a 10-year energy master plan, BPU has a community energy grant program. So that hasn't taken off the ground. They've gotten their first grant out. They're writing a contract for that. It's in Lawrence Township. And so it's taken a while for them to fashion what the contract looks like. But the next step is to fill that budget and then to go out and say, hey, municipalities, you want to develop an energy plan, a community energy plan, here's funding for you to go do that. So that's on the horizon. You should check out BPU's Clean Energy website for that. And then to get to 100% clean energy, depending on how you define that, by 2035, that is a big stretch. I would hedge my bet to say it's not doable by 2035, not 100%, but you'll get pretty much close to there. It all depends on how much offshore wind and how much wind and solar gets built in other states. So it's not unreasonable, but you're going to have to stretch. And I'll show you as I go through my presentation. So can I share my presentation?
Oh, yeah, you should have permission.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to do a couple of three things. I'm going to talk about the Energy Master Plan, what's in it in the 2019 plan, where the data is, sort of what policy and data they used to push the Energy Master Plan in 2019, and what sort of policy the Energy Master Plan pushes. And then I'm going to get to a local level, what you can do at a local level, just within your home, within businesses. And I've gone through Middletown's Energy Master Plan, and it's very good. Good data in there. I can suggest ways that you could just tweak it to make it just a little better. And part of my presentation will be that sort of tweaking on how you connect these things. Because what we do in all of these plans is revert to these silos. We build a silo. We said EVs over here, solar over here, energy efficiency over here, heat pumps over here, and we don't connect them together. And that's what really is going to take you to 20 to 50 by 2030 or 100% by 35, is you really got to link these things together and do them connected in an integrated fashion, more so than just say, putting solar over here and somebody else is getting an EV over here. So I guess I can run this through. Everybody can see the slides? Yep, okay. And you can see my pointer? Okay, so this is the electric grid. It's huge. You can get an electron from California and move it all the way to Maine. There's 200,000 miles of transmission lines crossing the country. This is the natural gas intrastate and interstate pipelines. There's 300,000 miles of pipeline. And these are the oil pipelines. There's 200,000 miles of pipelines. And you can see most of the gas coming from Pennsylvania and Texas, Oklahoma, you know, the hotspots for oil and gas. So you can transverse the United States, you know, 30 times with all the pipelines and wires that we have out there. And I can answer, I mean, if folks really want a question, you can raise your hand. I might not be able to see you all. Maybe Steve, you can monitor that. If it's a really pressing question, I can stop and answer it. Or I can
Sure,
wait till
I'll monitor the chat, or
Okay.
well, or your appearance. I'll just look at the appearance for a hand.
So, you know, 90% of the energy we use to do work is basically from the combustion of fossil fuel, just about that number nationwide. When you burn a fossil fuel, you're releasing the sequestered materials that are in the fossil fuels. You know, organic material on the earth today, 1 million years will be fossil fuels. They have emissions. Most of those emissions, NOx, SO2, mercury, cadmium, lead, they can all be controlled really good, really well. And I'm an engineer, so don't hold me back for English. Really well with back-end control technologies. The issue with CO2, which is sequestered carbon being released, is there's not a back-end control technology or really a cost-effective people are trying to look at carbon capture and sequestration as a back-end control technology, but that's not like, acid gas control or activated carbon to control mercury or the catalytic converter on your car. There really is no system for back-end control. It's changing this entire system, and that's the resistance. If there was a back-end control technology, there wouldn't be climate deniers. It's just, you have to change this massive system. And the federal government has its place and the state has its place. And you can do this somewhat from the top down, but you can't do all of it from the top down. It really takes a bottom-up approach to managing this program. And I'll talk, or these issues, and I'll talk about how you put those things together. So when we talk about CO2 emissions, this is from the Energy Master Plan. It's great to put these things in sectors so you can start developing strategies. You can see transportation is the largest greenhouse gas emissions in New Jersey. It's over 40%. Residential and commercial, mostly heating of buildings. Electric generation followed but with 20%. Industrial, same thing with industrial. It's heating processes, thermal processes, burning oil or natural gas. And then the rest, waste generation. You could split that up by what are the fuel types that generate those emissions. So in the transportation sector, 32% of that comes from gasoline in New Jersey. But here's the interesting point: in electricity, buildings, and industry, 43% of our emissions come from natural gas. So you're going to build strategies to address gasoline, natural gas, buildings, and the transportation sector. And those are the things you'll see in the Energy Master Plan as things go along, and in Middletown's Energy Master Plan, and whether you build an Energy Master Plan. So when you put those things together in terms of the goals, the strategies sort of roll out pretty simply. Advancing clean transportation with electric vehicles, advancing clean energy with renewable energy, advancing energy efficiency, advancing building electrification, and a smart grid. So you can tie all this thing together with smart grid, and you can go through the Energy Master Plan and look at how it sets the goal for 100% reduction, 100% clean energy, and an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. That's the goal in the 2019 plan. It may be changing. I know the federal goal is a 50% by 2030. And we'll see how that goes in the Paris, not the Paris, Copenhagen agreements, I guess it is, or Glasgow. So here's another chart that's in the Energy Master Plan. This is emissions by sectors. And you can see if you apply those strategies in the Energy Master Plan, how you can reduce those emissions by 2050 and reach the goal. And I'll summarize those in a second. But if you want to get to 50% by 2030, you can see that black line that I drew on there. You're going to have to accelerate those policies and those strategies that are in the Energy Master Plan. It's not a lot to do that, and I'll show you in a couple of charts how that can go along. You can, again, look at that from different fuel types. So fossil gas, pipe gas, gasoline, petroleum. And you can see if you apply those strategies, the decline in emissions over time to get to the goal. And that was the modeling that was done on the least cost scenario to get to those emission points. There's several different pathways to get to that endpoint, but there's one least cost pathway that gets you there. You want to do something else? If you're saying you want to roll out electric vehicles slower, you're going to have to do something else that might be more costly in the end. Or if you don't want to electrify buildings, you may have to pay more for solar. So that's the strategy. In the Energy Master Plan, they looked at 12 different variations on different strategies on how to come up with the least cost. The interesting point is that, where's my pointer? Anyway, so the interesting point is this is the Clean Energy Act of 2018. It actually takes us through 2030 with existing policies. So we're pretty good in this pathway down to 80% reduction and meeting the goals in the Energy Master Plan, just with the changes in the 2018 Clean Energy Act. So But again, if you want to accelerate that and get to 50% by 2030, you can see that bold line that was thrown in there and where you have to improve or increase your policies. I'll talk about that in a second. So the Energy Master Plan looked at electrifying buildings, electrifying transportation. So electricity is going to double. You're going to go from 75 million megawatt hours of use to 150 million. And you're going to pay for that. You're going to have to build out the infrastructure and you're going to pay twice as much for electricity. But the good news is you're going to reduce gasoline and natural gas and diesel and the cost for that. So when you net out that I'm reducing paying for gasoline, but I'm increasing my cost for natural gas, it's actually more efficient to use electricity than all of these other types of fuels. You're more efficient, you're using less energy, and overall it's about the same amount of cost. And you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen is the increase in clean energy generation over time. We go from natural gas and nuclear about 40%, 50%, depending on the time of year, whether natural gas is high, whether nuclear costs are lower. And then that increases to solar and wind in 2050 with some nuclear baseload staying in. And this is the cost for meeting those strategies to get to those reductions by 2050. It was and you see this in the Middletown Energy Master Plan, Steve, you reported it, a 2% increase in GDP. A 2% increase in GDP is $2.1 billion over the business as usual case. And that $2.1 billion is a lot of money when you consider the state's GDP is $600 billion. That's where you get that. It's only a 0.2% increase in the total GDP. So, and then on the other side of that equation, in terms of benefits, it's about a $4 to $6 billion benefit versus the cost. So you have a benefit to cost ratio of about 2 to 3 times, which anything greater than 1 is deemed to be cost effective. In the modeling that was done for the Energy Master Plan, you have a cost, but that cost the benefits far exceed the cost as you move on. And that's to get, again, to 80% by 2050, 80% greenhouse gas reductions by 2050, and to get to 100% clean energy, which is defined as carbon neutral electric generation, not carbon free. So you have a ways to go if you want to change that. So in summary, the good thing that came out of and you can go to the website and look at the presentation that was done. You can read this in the Energy Master Plan. You can get to those goals with existing technology. There isn't new innovative technology that needs to be developed that's on the horizon. The technology we have today in our portfolio can get you to the Global Warming Response Act goals and 100% clean energy. That cost is relatively small, not to say that $2.1 billion is ever small, but compared to offsetting the clean air benefits and the health benefits, benefits that exceed the cost. And you're going to get most, starting on your way with existing policies, but you have to expand those policies. And I'll talk about how you can do that and how you can look at doing that. And the least cost scenario is what we were just talking about, how to get through that least cost scenario. So here's what I mean by, this is where, we can change the demand curve. And that's what you really need to do, is change that demand curve. And people in the industry aren't going to pay attention until you start to shift that demand curve. So natural gas is still going up and increasing in demand. They're going to build pipelines. Oil is increasing in demand. They're going to build pipelines. Electricity is flattening out and getting less. They're not going and building transmission wires, or some replacements, but there's not a big drive as there were 10 and 20 years ago to build a whole lot of transmission systems and a lot of generation. So only you need to replace the generation you have, and you replace the transmissions that you have, but they're not the big drive to do the overall, increasing the transmission systems. And what you have here in front of you is that black line on the bottom is the electric use on an annual basis. Here's what it would be if we didn't have the solar program. Here's what it would be if we didn't have appliance standards and building codes. And here's what it would be if we didn't have the energy efficiency program. So total that together, this is where you would have been if we didn't have those programs. Solar on your home. Solar on your home mostly acts like energy efficiency. It reduces the load to the grid, even though it's generation. Same thing with appliance standards, building codes, and energy efficiency programs. That's 10 million megawatts in 2016 that didn't need to be generated. The emissions from that didn't need to be generated. That's $1 billion worth of cost that New Jersey ratepayers didn't have to pay. $100 in the pocket of every consumer in New Jersey for not having to pay for those electricity. And that's what you can point to saying, yes, when you do these things, your benefits far exceed the cost. And you can show how you can change the demand curve. When we start, and the way you're doing this is you're consistently running a statewide program that has a budget that people can know is happening. What was happening is even the utilities and PJM didn't even recognize this happening. This is a 0.5% change every year. So the annual savings in the energy efficiency program is about 0.5%. Doesn't mean anything when you're talking about 75 million megawatt hours annually, but that's compounded. It's not simple interest, it's compounded. The energy savings from last year is still there, and you're building on top of that. So you keep compounding those savings, and pretty soon, if you have a consistent program that year in and year out has a budget that you can rely on, you can start to get big, significant benefits. And you see this in this chart that sort of expands that curve that we just looked at. This goes all the way back to the 60s. Pre-oil embargo, we were on a 7% growth in electricity annual. After that, it's about 1 or 2% until we came on through and states started implementing statewide complete energy efficiency programs, energy efficiency codes, building appliance standard codes, and clean energy generation. And you can see it's starting to bend the curve in recent years. And if we would have stayed on this curve here, that's 110 million megawatt hours of electricity, a 40% reduction in electric use. That's $3.5 billion that didn't need to be spent on electricity and the emissions that would have come with that. So again, you can point to $2.1 billion of cost, but here already, just in some of the programs, you're saving $3.5 billion. So you're already paid for those savings. It's not really the way it works, but you can look at it that way. And 8.4 million metric tons of avoided CO2 on an annual basis. This chart is a little busy, but this is the reason why I come back and say we're optimistic about meeting our goals. This red line here, this is the Global Warming Response Act requirement for 2020. We had to get to 1990 levels by 2020. That was a 20% reduction. You had to be at 120 million metric tons of CO2. This gray line is if you take, why can't I see my pointer? But this gray line is the Paris target for the US converted to New Jersey. This yellow line is the Global Warming Response Act requirement for 2050, an 80% reduction in 2006 levels by 2050. This blue line is all the annual CO2 emissions for New Jersey. And this blue dotted line is actually the trend of that data. So we're below, if we stay on that trend line, we're below where we need to be to meet the requirements for the 2050 greenhouse gas reductions. And people say, well, you've got these reductions because natural gas came in and replaced coal, and natural gas was lower cost. But a lot of people didn't see that market changing. A lot of people that manage these emissions didn't see that market change on the Marcellus Shale coming. The same market forces that are in place for the Marcellus Shale changing the cost for coal and natural gas are in play right today with solar and offshore wind and wind replacing natural gas. The same market forces in terms of reductions in cost are in play right now. And you're going to be able to use those market forces to get beyond where you need to go in what's set. And here's where that 50% reduction, if you stay on this trend line, you can get to 2034 with a 50% reduction just on staying on the current trend line. So tweaking just a little policies means you can get to that 20. That's why I say I'm pretty optimistic. If you pick a 50% reduction by 2030, it's probably doable. And again, that comes with a cost. So you can't ever forget that it doesn't come for free. There's a cost to getting to do that. The benefits are going to be outweighing those costs, but those are doable within the time frame that we're talking. So another reason I'm pretty optimistic in terms of where we're going is just how policies grow. And I showed you that chart that said, here's the existing policies, and it's not going, the existing policies are not going to be able to take us to 2050. We need more. So I'm going to show you how policies grow and how they expand over time. So when energy was deregulated, when you can go out and buy electricity and natural gas, people on the environmental side said, people are going to buy cheap coal, we're going to get higher emissions. The countervailing part of that in the energy deregulation law was the renewable portfolio standard. They said, okay, you suppliers that are going to sell electricity and you may sell cheap coal electricity people, you have to have some renewables in your portfolio. And the way that works is a renewable generator generates electricity. They put electricity into the market just like anybody else. And when they put a megawatt worth of electricity in the market, they get a certificate to represent the attributes, mostly environmental benefits of that electricity. They get that one certificate. Again, they have to put the electricity in the market and they get to sell that certificate to an electric supplier who has to comply with the renewable portfolio standard. And just a short way to make that, here's the rule that goes put in place. RPS rule says this is the amount of renewables you, third-party suppliers or LS load serving entities have to have in your portfolio that you sell to customers. They go to the market to buy them. Generators generate those certificates. They put the electricity and they sell their electricity. Then they sell their certificates separately, and that's how the system works. Here's another little busy chart. So that red line on the bottom, that's when the energy deregulation law was first passed. It started at 0.25% RPS, so 0.25% of the entire electric sales had to be renewable. If you stayed with that policy until 2030, you would have got a 10% renewable RPS. Lo and behold, the board comes in, looks at this and says, hey, by board order, we're going to double that amount. So that's that light gray line. Says we're going to change that policy. And if you stayed on that policy, so they doubled the RPS, you stayed on that policy line, you would have been at 2030, 14% renewable portfolio standard. The board, the BPU went ahead and developed some regulations that said we want 20% of renewables by 2020. We want 2% of that solar. You can see this over here. If you stayed on that policy line, you would have been at 36% RPS by 2030. Lo and behold, the legislature comes in and says, we're going to up that to 50% by 2030. So you can see these endpoints along this curve is what I call the optimistic curve. That's how policy changes over time to be able to get to your goals in whatever you set in 2030 or 2050. And just to show you how I think we're going to get to the goal that we set in 2008 for solar was 2% by 2020. By 2020, we were over 5% solar. So that, we're not setting these unreachable goals. There is, some ability to say, these are the numbers we're going to see. Here's how we're going to do this. And there's some reasonableness in setting those policies and being able to achieve them. But I also say, to get to 80 by 50 or 50 by 30, you don't really need a federal carbon tax. It's nice to have. It would help on our side. You don't need the federal clean energy standard or a cap and trade program. You have every tool today to get to those numbers today. And I'll show you how you can beat that energy system from the inside out by changing the demand curve. And that's what I'm going to talk about now, is a little more about solar and storage. I'm going to go into some detail about how you could build out a solar system on your home or business, because I think that's the linchpin to what we're doing, at least at the local level and at the homeowner and business level, because the federal government and the state is going to take care of big grid supply, offshore wind, bigger standards, grid supply solar, and all of those things, and biomass facilities. But on the local side, it's going to be distributed solar and storage. So I'll spend some time on that. First thing you need to do is understand your energy use. That's really easy to do. You know, what's your electric use, what's your natural gas use, gasoline, and you can convert that by emission factors and get your house. So if you just take an average home, 24 square feet, 3 household members, it has 2 cars that drive an average, you're going to use 1,000 gallons of gasoline a year. If that car is an average car, about 1,000 therms and about 9,000 kilowatt hours per year. And I think, Steve, in your energy master plan, you said 8,900 kilowatt hours per year. So we're in the same ballpark for average. You can multiply those things out, the cost for gasoline, the cost for natural gas, the cost for electricity, you know, those emission factors, and you can get your what your household cost would be, $5,800 of energy cost. And an interesting point, most people think New Jersey is a high energy cost state. Where actually, when you look at total energy cost, we're the 44th lowest energy cost state in the country. We have high electric costs, but natural gas are probably some of the lowest, and then gasoline is average. So we are a sort of average low cost energy cost state. And 80% of that cost is in gasoline and electricity, but 80%, over 80% of the emissions are in natural gas and gasoline. So again, at the household level, it all depends. Do you want to save energy and save cost, or do you want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Some of that is an overlap, and I'll talk about that, but some of that is different policies and different programs. That's good on an average basis, but you want to know, what am I doing on a monthly basis? You can go to your utility and ask them for your monthly data. They will send that to you. Every utility does that now. But that's monthly electric and gas. You can figure out your mileage on your car by going to DOE and EPA in terms of gas mileage. And every utility now has an energy home calculator. You can go to the utility, plug in some numbers about your home, your age, type of insulation, windows. It takes you about 20 minutes to do that. And they will spit out a chart for your home saying, here's the electric energy use that you use. And based on the rate, here's the cost. It'll spit out a chart for you. You can see on a monthly basis what you're using, how much you're using. That blue is my central air conditioning system, although a little more than that. I mean, a little less than that. You can do that for natural gas on therms in terms of heating and hot water systems and cooking. Once you do that, you can then take this rule of thumb for building solar. So for every kilowatt hour of solar that I install, I know I'm going to generate 1,100 kilowatt hours of electric energy. And it's based on the amount of solar that's hitting New Jersey per meter squared and the efficiency of panels. But that's a rough rule of thumb that we use in terms of calculating the amount of energy that's going to be produced for the amount of kilowatt hours that you install. And you can just do that in reverse. You need 9,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. You need an 8 kW system. It's going to be about 24 panels on the roof. It's going to be about 16 by 24. So, you know, you can go out and look on your roof. Do I have enough space? Can I put that much solar on my roof? Can I carry the entire load of my building? And then we'll talk about something about cost. There's a real simple program that's out there called PV Watt. You plug in the DC size of the system. I put in 7 here. Again, you can put in whatever number you want. You can go on there, it gives you a little Google map. You can digitize your roof space and it'll tell you how much you can fit on your roof. There's sort of, average system losses that you put in there. You put in the slope of the roof, typically, 20, 30%, and whether it's south facing, east facing, west, and you put in the number for the kilowatt hours. And it'll come out with a chart that says here on a monthly basis, the amount of electricity that you're going to generate and the amount of avoided costs that your system's going to generate. Real simple stuff. And every sort of solar estimator that's out there uses this program. It's real simple to use. It's a DOE program. It's free. It's run by NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab. And as I said, it's free. You can just go in there and plug it in and play with it. It takes you 5 minutes to put in your zip code, find your home. You can put in your address and then run the model. It takes you 5 minutes. Then you can compare your energy use on a monthly basis to what you're generating. And you can see here, I'm using more electricity. On an annual basis, I'm going to carry the entire load of an average home, but during the summer, I'm not going to carry that. And that's where net metering comes in. So net over the year, I'm going to have a 0 electric bill, but in the summer, I haven't put enough solar on the roof to carry to get me to net out during July and August my bill. What you can do is you can then decide, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can do energy efficiency before and decide you're going to put in a smaller system to carry your load, or you can build a larger system and put in energy efficiency after and carry more of your load and have more electricity that's generated, be able to make decisions about other things as you go down the pathway. And then you have to understand what the cost is. It's $3 a watt install for that 7 kW system, $21,000. The way you get that, there's a US DOE lab, NREL and LBL that publishes this data on an annual basis. It's called Tracking the Sun. They will tell you what the cost is for a solar panel in the US on average. They'll do it for residential, commercial, utility scale. They do it by state. So you can look at New Jersey and see what is New Jersey below average or higher than average. And typically New Jersey is below than average cost because we've been doing this for a while. You put in that cost, there's a 26% federal investment tax credit. So a 7 kW system will cost you $15,500. You have to know to calculate your simple payback period, what your revenues are. And that revenues is just the net metering avoided cost and how much those SRECs you're going to get. In the past, I talked about the renewable generators selling in the market and people buying. That was a competitive system. Now it's a set system. You get $90 for every megawatt hour that you generate. It's called successive solar program and incentive program, SUSI, but it's SREX 2. You get $90 for this first tranche of 150 megawatts. So you know what your SREC values are going to be, and you know you're going to get them for 15 years. You know what your avoided cost for electricity is. It's just under $1,500 for avoided cost. That's 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour for almost 9,000 kilowatt hours per year. You know what your SREC values are. Your total revenues are $22.69 per year. You just divide that into the cost of the system on with the investment tax credit, and installing that system will get you a simple payback period, including the cost of money or discount rates and all of that other stuff, but a simple payback of less than 7 years, just on the avoided cost of electricity in the SREC. So, a simple return on investment of about 14%, maybe 15%. Pretty good, not bad in terms of investments. Probably beats what you're doing in your 401k or your pension plan doing currently. So, a pretty good investment along the way. You can pay for that system up front with cash, or you can finance it. You get all the benefits. You don't want to do that. You can lease your roof space, or you can do a power purchase agreement. You don't get all the benefits, but there's no upfront cost and no maintenance of the system. You get the avoided cost for electricity, but all of those other benefits roll to the leaseor. So another thing to talk about is batteries. Just to, batteries are high cost now. Their costs are coming down just like solar. In 2003, solar cost $10, $12 a watt installed. It's now $2 or $3 a watt. So batteries are coming down, but right now it's pretty expensive. If you wanted to install batteries to cover a quarter of your average PV system output, it would cost you $10,000 more. If you wanted to put in enough batteries to cover to store your annual output, it would double the system cost. So you'd go from, paying $15,000 to paying $30,000. And the way that works is because of the cycle. If you only want energy supplied for an hour, the KW cost, the capital cost is less. It'll cost you about $500 per KW. If you wanted to have that battery supply electricity for 4 hours, you're going to quadruple the cost of that battery. So the more duration that you want in your storage, the higher the cost is. The lower the KW cost, kilowatt hour cost, but the higher the KW cost. At this point in time with net metering, you have to think, what do I want batteries for? I want batteries maybe if there's, the grid is out for some period of time. Do I need all of that batteries to do that? You can think about how many or how less in terms of batteries. You can dip your toe in this water for a little bit of cost and see how bad. We talked about solar and storage, and I said that's the linchpin to putting this all together. We're going to talk about EVs and then electric heat, building electrification, and some of that. So the way you're going to change the oil and gasoline demand curve is with electric vehicles. And that's the only way we're going to get to that, 50 by 30 is changing that oil and gasoline demand curve. And the only way to do that is with electric vehicles. The other benefit that comes along with that is the NOx emissions and particulate emissions from vehicles are pretty high. So you're not only getting CO2 reductions, but you're getting NOx reductions and particulates and a bunch of other things. But to buy a new EV, highly expensive. So a Model X, $86,000, even a mini electric base price at $31,000. You want to replace that battery pack, it's going to cost you $15,000. But the good thing is because there's a number of EVs on the market, they all got a rebate from the federal government, they're lower cost. There's dozens of EV models that you can buy used out there for under $20,000. You can buy a used Leaf for around $10,000. Probably has a good life in the battery, but if you want to replace the battery, $5,000 to replace that battery, stick in a level 2 charger, that's $17,000. You get 0.3 kilowatt hours per mile. You get an 80-mile charge. It's not great. The Model X has a 328-mile range on a charge. But to think about this, if you had a 40-mile round trip to work 5 days a week, and you're going to go 10,000 miles with an electric vehicle that drives average 25 miles per gallon, you need 416 gallons. That uses about 48 million BTUs, and the cost on an annual basis at $3.20 is about $1,300. To drive that electric vehicle, that same miles, 400 miles per year, you only need 3,536 kilowatt hours. It only uses 12 million BTUs. So you're using a quarter of the energy. An electric vehicle, taking the power in the battery to move into motion is 4 times more efficient than an internal combustion engine. A typical internal combustion engine taking the gasoline is about 20% conversion into motion. So you're saving just in terms of energy. The cost for you to drive that at 16 cents is $584 a year. So you're saving over $700 a year. And the avoided emissions just in driving that, in just getting a vehicle to replace your internal combustion engine, you're saving almost 3 metric tons per year in avoided emissions. But here's even better. And that's why I talked about solar for so long. If you take that magic number we talked about, that rule of thumb, 1,000 kilowatts per kW installed, divided into the 3,536 kilowatt hours per year to drive that 40 miles, you need a 3 kW system. With the investment tax credit, it costs you $7,000, a little over $7,000. Take the vehicle that you just bought used with the charger, so it's plus the solar system, the 3 kW solar system, so $2,400. Your avoided cost for gasoline and your SRECs are about $1,600. So it's a return on investment of about 7%. So a 14-year simple payback period. Not great, not really great, not a good investment. But what vehicle can you buy today that actually appreciates over time? As soon as you buy a vehicle, it depreciates. This vehicle, and you're not going to have it for 14 years, just an example, but that vehicle will pay for itself over time, and you get 4 tons of avoided emission. So that's what I'm talking about, is you have to start thinking about how to connect this, not just building solar on your roof, but saying, I'm building solar, enough solar to charge one of my electric vehicles over here, and I'm going to run my transportation without emissions, and I'm going to get some payback for doing that. The downside of this that people say is, well, you don't pay taxes, road taxes on gasoline. Well, electric, you do pay taxes on electricity. You could even pay double the amount of road taxes with your EV, and you still save money. A household, the average household, if they replace both of their vehicles that they drive with EVs, would save, even if they spent double the road tax, would save $1,000 a year in transportation costs. So an electric vehicle not only reduces emissions, but it saves you money over time. And that's the thought process that we have to start to think about, is how you put these things together. The next thing we'll talk about is electric heat. And the thing that's replacing, gasoline or oil heat, not gasoline, but natural gas heating, is an electric heat pump. They're very efficient. They can work down to about 0 degrees. As it gets colder and colder, the efficiency becomes less. So people are a little nervous about changing a natural gas heating system with a heat pump. But what you can do is dip your toe in the water and replace your water heater with an electric heating water heater, heat pump water heater. Here's an example. An efficient gas water heater will cost you $1,200 without a rebate of a little over $1,000. Their operating costs, you can see $2,500 a year, $250 a year, and how much emissions it generates. The electric heat pump costs you about $2,500 installed with a rebate, about $17,500 net cost. It costs more to run the electric heat pump, but you're avoiding about 1,000 tons of, well, more like 1,600 tons of emission. So it costs more to buy it, it costs more to run, but you have lower emissions. Why would you do that? You're not saving money with an electric heat pump. But again, if you start to think about how you connect this together, you need 2,000 kilowatt hours to run that heat pump on an annual basis. Divide that by 1,200, that's a more efficient solar panel. You need 1.5 kW of solar. It costs you, with the investment tax credit, $3,300. Your avoided cost of about $320 a year. You get a couple of SRECs at $100. So your revenue from that is $500. You pay off that 1.5 kW system in 6 years. If you connect that to your electric heat pump hot water heater, again, you're going to get, it's less, about a 10-year payback. So connecting these things together makes the economics of it even better. but you're going to be reducing your emissions 2.3 metric tons of avoided emissions, and you're starting to reduce the demand on the gas side. And the advantage of an electric heat pump is you get to take your electric that you generate and store it in your heat pump. It's just another storage device, just like a battery that will store. So you run your electric heat pump, store your hot water, and run your hot water when you need. So just in terms of trying to think about how you put this together, can we put enough solar to run our entire home? Run your electric vehicles, run your heating, run your cooling system. You would need 7 kW to run your cooling system, about 7 kW to run your heating system, and about 7 kW to run 2 electric vehicles. That's a 30 by 30 foot area that you need in solar panels. Cost you about $63,000. But again, you're going to get that return on investment. Not everybody and nobody can, shell out $63,000, but you can start to think about how you put these things together over time. The good thing about these systems is they're modular. You can put in 3 kW with power optimizers, and you can expand the system next year when you decide to buy a heat pump or when you decide to buy an electric vehicle. So solar on your roof is expandable, but can I cover my entire roof with solar panels? If you go to that PV watt system, you can put solar on the east side of your house and generate electricity. It's not the 8,900 kilowatt hours, it's only 7,600 kilowatt hours, and you can put it on the west side of your house. You can even build it on the north side of your house. Different installation operations for doing that, but you can. Everybody put it on the south side of the house because solar was very expensive. With solar coming down in cost, you can start to think about being able to cover your entire house or your roof space with solar, and they're starting to talk about solar shingles, about covering your space entirely. So that's how we have to start to think about how we put these things together, not build a silo to say, just put on 7 kW of solar, I did my job, I reduced my emissions. But you have to think about how you relate that to buying an electric vehicle or buying an electric heat pump and moving forward in a more coordinated manner. So things that Middletown or folks can do, start thinking about how many houses or how many organizations in Middletown have solar. You can do that by going to the permit office and saying, do me a GIS map of the number of solar operations that are in Middletown. Tell me how many people have installed EVs. Again, you need a permit to do that. Public information says you can ask your permit office for that information. And if they're good, if they work well with your green team, they'll do a GIS map for you to say, here's where they're all located. You can even go to the BPU website, the Clean Energy website. It'll tell you where all of these are in the municipality. So you can click on the list of all the solar installations in the state, and you can sort it and see how many solar operations are in Middletown or whatever town. They won't give you the address, but they'll tell you how many are actually installed and give you the zip code. You can see how many folks have installed EVs or heat pumps, and you can start to connect these things together. And whether you want to, have solar canopies built over parking lots, and how many solar canopies can install EV charging systems together. That's how you're going to change that demand curve for natural gas and oil from the bottom up by doing these things in small steps. And the important part is you have to start collecting data. So how many of these are installed in Middletown? How many people have EVs that have solar in their home? And how many people are satisfied with those systems and are willing to be advocates for saying, yeah, I made these changes and they're actually working for me. So the more you can promote them at the local level up, that's where things are going to change, is because they don't change when the federal government tells you to do something or the state government tells you to do something. They change when your neighbor says, I did this and I just saved $1,000. That's the way things are going to change, and you have to change them really from the bottom up. And that's why I think I'm optimistic about being able to meet whether the goal is 80% by 2050 or 50% by 2030, because we're on that trajectory to be able to do that, and costs are in our favor, and the emission reductions are in our favor. So that's my presentation, a little long, sorry about that. And I'm willing to answer questions if you have questions, or if you're tired of me talking, I can just go away.
There were several questions. I haven't announced them. Lee had asked if PV solar is so cost effective, why doesn't JCP&L convert to solar generation and save me the trouble?
So you would have to find a big space. So if you wanted to carry the entire load for JCP&L, they would have to do that in a large area. So can they rent out every one of your roof spaces? That's an interesting concept about whether they could do that. I think they will get there. Once you start changing their bottom line, and now it's 5%, I think actually it's about 7% solar in New Jersey. You get to 10, 20% solar, they are going to start to, and even before you get to 20%, they're going to start to think about, and they're already doing this with energy efficiency. How do I run that program so it works for me? They did run, PSE&G did run a loan program, very expensive. The loan interest rate was like 16% to have them get their money back on the weighted average cost of capital. So they are starting to think about doing that. So they can do that. If they wanted to build one big solar generation, it would take you a lot of space. That's why roof spaces are the easiest thing to do. And you get the benefit. Why would you want JCP&L to get all the benefit? They're just going to then charge you for that electricity.
Oh, Bob, do you want to just tell what your question is?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Michael. Thank you for your talk. Very interesting. I mean, you alluded to the RPS earlier, but to my knowledge, the New Jersey RPS is capped at 50% for 2030, 31, 32, and 33.
Right.
How can we possibly get close to Biden's executive order objective of 100% clean electric by 2035 with New Jersey's capped at 50% just a few years away now?
So you go back to, the legislature and say, I think they're going to react to what happens in the reconciliation bill, and I think you got to get past the governor's election and you don't want to pile on too much. 50% RPS is a big step, but I do think it will change in the future. It doesn't have to change tomorrow. You're still on your way to get to 50% by 2030. As you're going on your way to get to 50%, you can start to work to get to 80%. But an RPS isn't the be all or end all. It's actually building that in state. So the RPS is anywhere in PJM. So I can install solar and wind and biomass anywhere in the 14 states in PJM, and I can get those credits. What you want to do, and what I was talking about, is you want to build it in state. You want to put it on your roof and take advantage of that. You want to build offshore wind in New Jersey and take advantage of that. You don't want to send your energy dollars out to somebody in Indiana or, West Virginia. Why would you want to do that when you could build it in state, on your home, on your business, on an open space? Well, whatever.
Well, that might get into a long discussion of the pros and cons of solar on roofs. I agree with the wind turbine, though.
So offshore wind, and that's something the discussion I was having here today is what you can do at your level. You can always push the state government to do something and say, build more offshore wind, but that's you pushing. The state government has to say, I want to do that, or the federal government. But you can do this stuff today on your roof. And that was more of the presentation, is what can you do today to change that demand curve? Once that demand curve starts to change, you're going to get people to wake up in the oil and gas business saying, And they're already doing this. You see New Jersey Natural saying, hey, maybe I can make renewable gas, hydrogen. Maybe I can make renewable gas and put that in the pipeline system. So you're going to see those changes happening. You just, I think you have to be part of that solution to push that demand curve in the other way. Was my presentation. So
We could buy in though to community solar.
and that's
a more efficient
some,
way to it's a lower cost per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, and that puts together, right, the lower cost on building bigger to a community solar project. But again, in a community solar project, you can build 5 kW. So if you do the math, you can do community solar to address 1,200 people in your township, right? So how many of those 5 kW systems are you going to be able to build in Middletown? 1, 2.
I think our advocacy has been for the RGEA and getting Middletown to convert to do that. But we do obstacles, probably political, mostly, I imagine, and maybe some on pricing, on willingness to, for something that might be higher cost even.
So the RGA is probably about the easiest thing you can do if you want to get to energy goal.
Except they won't do it.
Well,
so far.
Yeah. Well,
so far it's been a long time.
Yeah, but again, and today it's not a big cost differential. So if you're going out to the market today to buy renewables, you're not making money. So the municipality isn't going to step in just to lower that carbon footprint. There are municipalities that are doing that, but you have to have that economic benefit. If they're going to say for everybody in my municipality, I'm buying this for everybody, there has to be a cost savings. And at this point in time, there's only a small cost savings for doing that. It all depends on how much renewables you add into that number. So the projection is next year, you should see the BGS auction actually going the other way. So there'll be a bigger cost savings by next year. This year, the projections are you aren't going to, if you go out to bid, you aren't going to get that as much savings on your electric bill. So you got to think about the politician and what he's thinking about. You want to do this, but then there's a whole bunch of people that don't want to do that. He has to convince them this is good for them in their pocketbook as well as good for the environment. So
I think we need a statewide RGEA where consumers across the state can sign up for renewable energy without any trouble or issue whatsoever.
You can do that. You can go to Green A and get buy as much renewables as you want. You can do that without the state. You can buy green.
No, then I have to sign a contract or get stuck like a Texas consumer, or like what happened in New Jersey. There was a polar vortex several years ago.
Right.
Why do I want to make, 1 million New Jersey consumers go out and have to research a bunch of third-party suppliers?
Then that's the RPS, and you're just saying increase the RPS.
Well,
I mean, that's an approach, but again, then your energy dollars are going out of state instead of keeping them in state, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's not.
When I buy a car or buy food, most of it goes out of state too. I don't know if average consumers thinking about like, oh, okay, my electric bill, I'm concerned about where the money's going. I mean, I don't think so.
You're right, but you have the power to be able to do that and keep that in state instead of spending it and doing it out of state. It's just a choice you can make. You're right.
I agree with the wind turbine part of it. I mean, I think that's a great program, but I think we've got a big gap on providing, renewable systems to the average person in New Jersey. I mean,
right.
But
you can, there's no reason you can't do both. I mean, it's not a pick one from column A and go away. It's pick one from column A and B, and you can still put solar and get an RPS. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. So
I agree. There's a fraction of people who can and would implement solar on their roofs. Some have done so.
Right.
Like if I take my neighborhood, I don't know how many houses there are, but I think there's about 50. There might be 4 houses after 30 years of solar. There might be 4.
You might be surprised. Go to your permit office and see.
No. I counted them on the roofs of our neighborhood. I look at them.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but you're right. I mean, it's just a sample of 50.
Right.
You know, what I worry about is that we're going to get so many people signing up for RGEA that the renewable won't be there. Where's it coming from?
So you have plenty of wind out there. You know, the class 1 market doesn't sell out. The class 1 rec market doesn't sell out. So that's what you're buying is class 1 recs from, you know, and so you can buy a rec when you get an RGA, they can buy a rec from anywhere in PJM.
Right.
They can also buy a rec from anywhere that's sending energy into PJM. So if Iowa doesn't have an RP, or they have a real small RPS with a lot of wind turbines, and they send their energy into PJM, you can actually buy those RECs. So you know, there are states where there are no, you know, I don't think West Virginia has an RPS. They have a lot of, you know, mountaintop wind. So you're buying those wind energy from them. They don't need them to supply their RPS. So there is an abundant supply. But,
is there enough
you know,
transmission?
Yeah. So
there is.
And again, you're buying a certificate. The electricity goes where the electricity goes. Again, you have to put it into the grid. And when you put it into the grid, it pushes off somebody that's probably a coal or a higher cost system, because you have a contract for that electron. That electron's going into the grid to be used. It's going into the pool, which somebody else, they're saying, hey, we don't need you to run. You're a coal electron. I don't need you because I have this solar electron that somebody already bought. So that's the way it basically works. It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, there's enough transmission to.
Okay, I'm glad to
You
hear
need
that.
to let Marty talk. He's had his hand
Oh,
up.
sorry.
Right.
Oh, Marty, sorry. Didn't see the gold hand. Oh,
Thank you. One of my questions was about one of your earlier slides. I think you had made an assumption that, and maybe it's you know, from the clean energy plan, that nuclear energy would continue at the same level it's been at for the next 30 years. And if I understand correctly, most of the nuclear plants are really at the end of their life cycle. And I know we ended up having to pay, I think it's $300 million to support the one down in Salem. So I hate to see what other expenses are coming down the line to continue.
You paid
energy.
you paid $300 million because natural gas is cheaper and nuclear wasn't selling as much electricity. So if you look at it, we're about 60% natural gas. We were about 30% natural gas. Natural gas was so cheap, it's pushing out nuclear. And they're saying, hey, look, I can't make my economics. I'm going to have to shut down. And that's what PJM is. PJM is based on price. That's why coal companies shut down, because they couldn't run. They couldn't get any economics because gas and nuclear were cheaper. So coal wasn't able to bid in and they closed. That's a good thing. But then when nuclear came, natural gas came along, Nuke said, hey, I can't make my economics. I'm going to have to shut down. And if you shut down nukes, you know, where are you going to get your greenhouse gas reductions? There was a lot of discussion about, you know, will the nukes last through 2050? You know, can they repower? I think there was a consensus that they can make it through 2050 with what they have now. But are they going to expand? That was a question. I don't think folks said you're going to see nuclear expand in New Jersey. So.
Yeah, and then the other thing, of course, is that the cost curve has changed dramatically, even since the beginning of this year, both in terms of natural gas and in terms of oil. So a lot of those charts need to be probably rejiggered with.
So natural gas, the Henry Hub doubled, went from $2 an MMBTU to over $5. Yeah, so, and that's a lot of what happened with Ida and, things that happened in the Gulf Coast. Things, some regulatory issues, but mostly weather related, pipelines that aren't getting built, so increase that cost. And they sort of track with oil costs being over $80 a barrel now. So yeah, and that's a good thing for solar. I mean,
I would
that,
think, I agree.
yeah,
I
not
agree.
that you want to say, hey, I'm raising my energy costs, and that's a good thing for New Jersey. But when you do the math on those other things, now you get a better return on your investment. And again, not that you want to praise an increase in energy
Yeah.
costs. Like,
And one other factor, if we figure that by 2030, what, 30 to 50% of the vehicles on the road will be electric, then that's going to add a significant additional demand on the electric curve for
right.
the
And
state.
you're already seeing utilities start to plan for that, right? So a lot of that, charging is going to happen at home, right? So your pole mounted transformer that's out there, that little drum that, all of those things are going to have to be replaced. You're probably over 20 years, you're probably talking $2-3 billion worth of cost over
That's
time.
a
But again,
significant
over 20
infrastructure.
years, it's $200 million a year. It's about $30 per household cost. It's the $300 million on the nuclear was $41 per household. So, $200 million is about half of that. So,
Okay. All right.
but
Great. Well,
again, and again, it's a build out over 20 years. It's not build out tomorrow. So
Right. We're not all of a sudden all going to go out and buy
yeah,
electric vehicles
yeah.
tomorrow. I agree totally.
But just think about, so we went through this when everybody went from not having air conditioning to having central air conditioning. You didn't even see the growth in the distribution system, the pole mounted transformers and all of that. That happened and nobody said, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? The utilities are looking at the same curves that you're looking at and saying, I have to be the responsible entity here. I have to build out my system for the demand that's coming on the electric side. And they're putting those plans in as we speak. So
Yeah, and they
you'll
saw
see
their
that
revenue
happen.
going up year after year because of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So their revenues go up, natural gas and oil go down, and what your costs are going to be about the same. You pay about $5,800 in today, you'll pay about $5,800 in 2050, at, $2020.
Do you have
Okay.
a feel for
Great. Thank you.
offshore wind costs? It looks like it's very expensive. Is that going to? And I heard the governor say it's not going to be paid out of the ratepayers' pocket.
So
Where's that going to come from?
So it is, so the OREC that's subsidizing that is an all-in cost. But the megawatt hours that they generate, when they sell those megawatt hours and they sell their capacity, that gets returned back to the ratepayer. So we're putting up, the ratepayers are putting up an incentive for them to build, but when they get paid per megawatt hour and when they get paid for the capacity, that gets returned to the ratepayer. So you're just paying the net. And then if you look at what the cost is in Europe, as you build these, that cost is basically in Europe unsubsidized. So they're building an offshore project just like they would build a natural gas plant. If the economics are there, they're going to build it and you're going to pay for the cost of that generation, just like you pay for building a natural gas plant to generate electricity.
Okay. There was a question from Paul Rainier. He had to leave for another meeting, but and he raises a good point. It's the carbon footprint of what you're talking about doesn't include things like production and delivery costs of everything we buy and consume, or like the food. How far off are we in terms of total greenhouse gas?
So there's two ways you can do your carbon footprint: consumption based or production based. So you got to do it one or the other. If you try to do it, half of one, half of the other, you're double counting. So if everybody does a production base, you get it counted for. So my, carbon footprint in Pennsylvania counts for, the whatever they're making in Pennsylvania, the, eggs or milk that we're buying from Pennsylvania. So it's a matter of, do you want everybody to do a production base, or do you want to do it a consumption base? You do it a consumption base, then you're not paying for, you don't need, to know what Pennsylvania is doing. So it's just 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But you're right. I mean, if you want to look at everything I do as a consumption base, you could do that, but then everybody has to do that for it to be fair, and you're not double counting. So just, either way it works.
Okay. Wow. Does anybody else have questions? Amazing. Michael, you answered our questions before we
I
asked
wish
them.
you luck with, following up with the governor on a 50 by 30 plan. I do think it's doable. I think, we're on the trend that we're on now, we're probably close to doing that. You guys push them, you can probably get there by 2030 with 50% reductions without a whole lot of cost added to the system. But you got to do your part. You got to go out and get an electric vehicle. You got to go out and get an electric heat pump, water heater, and you got to think about putting solar and batteries on your home. So if you don't do those things, you're not going to get to 50% reduction by 2030. It's just not in the cards.
I really admire New York State and New York City in particular for motivating the people and having these huge campaigns, and they are getting people like to retrofit buildings and to install even geothermal heat pumps.
Yeah.
They're doing a good job. I don't see that in New Jersey.
Well, so you got the power to do that. I mean, in Middletown, 50 by 30, just promoting, going out and saying, okay, who's got solar, who's got EVs, who's happy to do that. And it's this neighbor to neighbor connection that I think you really build this thing from the bottom up, not from the top down. And you got a lot of power in being able to do that. I mean, I know, there's a place for the state, there's a place for the municipality and the federal government, but you have to push them along, and they have to take the data that you help them put together. So that's my point.
I don't think you know Monmouth County.
Hey,
We can't even get people to wear masks here.
Yeah, people are dying.
But when you're talking about saving money, I mean, you get an electric vehicle, I'm saving $1,000 a year. It's just, I know people will be stubborn about, hey, I'm going to drive you can't tell me to drive an electric vehicle, but when they start seeing that it costs them less and it's easier to do, and I can charge it at home, I just, people are going to put aside their opposition and, save themselves some money. And you get the greenhouse gas reductions for that. So.
Are you starting this sort of campaign where you're executive director of Lawrence or Lawrence?
Yeah, so Sustainable Lawrence.
Lawrence.
So I'm your counterpart in Lawrence.
Okay. How successful are you in getting the
So
troops?
we have a grant from BPU to do an energy plan. So that's what we're a step behind you in what we're doing. I talk to the township and tell them, all the things that I can help them do. But they have to do the same thing that your town is doing, is deciding to go out to bid for our GEA and deciding to, put electric vehicle chargers. They want to go for gold in energy, just like your municipality wants to do. So we'll help them along.
Okay. So you're helping along.
Yeah.
So you're overall positive. We can do that across the state.
Yeah, I think there's enough municipalities. So you're right, Pat. There are some folks in some towns in Monmouth and other places that are going to say no, but there's enough towns that are saying yes. You just have to get more towns to say yes than to say no. And it just sort of, at some point in time, those people that are saying no. Yeah, I know.
We've been trying to convince them that they should be a leader, not a
right.
lagger.
Right. And it's a hard fight. They have a lot of things on their plate. The pandemic wasn't great for things. I know when I was talking to in my township, they're saying, hey, I can't even think about this. I don't know where my next, dollar is coming from, because I'm going to have to shut down this and I'm going to have to shut down that. Talk to me in 6 months. So we've passed that point. People are starting to come back out. We're having meetings, you know. So I think things are starting to turn around, and folks, you know, again, I'm a lot more optimistic about things happening in New Jersey. And it's not just New Jersey. You have 24 states that have plans just like New Jersey, some of them more aggressive than New Jersey. So, you know, you pile up the winners and you pile up the yeses against the nos, and eventually you win. It's just a hard slog. I hear you, Pat. It's just, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back all the time. So you just have to keep pushing forward.
Okay, Steve, I think we need to
Yeah,
let him leave.
Michael, thank you. That
welcome.
was an optimistic talk. Thank you.
You have a nice time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, I just have to stop sharing my screen and then get out of here. Take care.